Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Derivatives podcast. My name is Rosalie. I'm going to be hosting today's episode. I'm joined by Guillaume Lambert, founder of Panoptic, and Derek Barrera, founder of Steer Protocol today. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of kick this live stream off today. It's going to be the first in a little series that we're going to be doing with Steer for our new partnership. So we just launched a partnership together. We are hoping to build on-chain structured products and really push on-chain yield into a new direction. Um, before we dive into everything and get started, would you guys care to introduce yourselves and kind of describe what you're currently building and what kind of started this partnership? And yes.
Yeah, sure. Guillaume, why don't you start first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Guillaume Lambert. I'm the founder of Panoptic. We're doing on-chain options on Ethereum mainnet. We have an upcoming V2 that's about to launch very soon. And part of the V2 is we added, of course, new features, better contracts, but also a way to manage strategies. Vault will be at the core of the relaunch. And this is kind of how we got to meet with Derek and the Steer team as well. We wanted to onboard more managers, creators, and Derek's team as well as being world class on that front. So again, very excited about to talk about that today.
Nice. Yeah, my name's Derek. I'm the founder of Steer Protocol. We are one of the leading liquidity managers in the industry today. We're across about 60 different chains. We support about 70 dexes. We have the largest breadth, I think, right now in terms of distribution horizontally across basically every on-chain market there is. We One of the biggest things for us is that we help teams with their spot markets as they come online, or if you're like in a post-tokenization process. We also help you with your spot markets, maybe get you into lending markets. And now what's really exciting for us is to finally enable option markets within our platform, as well as providing some option strategies to the market, which allow people to find, basically hedged, risk profiles or basically payoff speeds that make sense for their portfolio versus investing into something and really not knowing what you're going to get out of it. But yeah, really excited about this partnership. We were trying to figure out what would be the best way to launch options, and there's a lot of different option providers out there. Having atomic options on chain that doesn't require an RFQ system is probably the most paramount thing that we were looking for, and really excited that Panoptic was able to offer that because I think it's kind of like the missing key right now for on-chain options.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's pretty much the main goal of the partnership is to create these option strategies that are going to be curated to based on different needs that different funds and institutions might have. And I think before this partnership, there were probably a lot of different constraints that each teams we were running into, you guys were running into. So kind of what were these pain points that you guys were seeing and kind of figuring out a way to build the solution for these and what main points kind of still exist as we're kind of developing the solutions for them.
Yeah, Kim, do you want to go or?
Yeah, so we're pre-launch, and at least on our side, what we found is that while options are extremely expressive and you can do a lot with them, it's still challenging for the retail users to get on board to it, but also trade successfully. And that was kind of a lot of our live streams. We're trying to teach and onboard more retail, but at the same time, we're neglecting the institutions, the larger funds that do need options almost structurally. So what we're trying to fix is one, getting the options entry point much easier for every participant, but also offer something that is much more scalable, so that an institution doesn't need to click on the UI to create the options. There could be a way to manage these strategies. And it's a big change that has to touch a smart contract. So whenever you do a protocol, it's quite hard to change something. So again, with V2, that's why we rebuild it from scratch. But then the first step is to make the whole infrastructure, make that management strategy possible. And the next step is now reaching out, getting fund managers to actually use it. and have strategists and also creators also manage these strategies. So that's kind of the first technical side is resolved. The next step is distribution and expanding this to both retail but also more institutional size user base.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, one of the biggest things for us is we were starting to build strategies and using the vault infrastructure that Panoptic has was, do you have the data sets available? Do you have the backtesting frameworks available as well? And can you basically verify these strategies before you bring them to market, and so that they can actually scale? That's been the biggest one, and what's really nice, I think, about what we enable as part of the process of working with you guys is that not only do we build products on top of our platform, but it's an open platform where other financial institutions or other partners can come in and basically build their own strategies. It doesn't have to be public code, and then still have this automated fashion of making sure that their strategies run how they want them to. And I think that's going to allow them to maybe jump on board quicker than what I've previously thought, which is really exciting.
Definitely. I think, yeah, early DeFi was really retail driven, and there were a lot of simple and gamified experiences and products out there. Options really didn't take off until really recently, I would say. Perps are still mainly in the focus, but with Risk and other protocols, options are moving more into retail. Why do you guys think it's been so hard for retail to kind of move towards options, and why have they stuck with perps? And do you guys expect institutions to be the first users here, or is it going to be just a mix of both?
I'll take this one if that's okay. I think it'll be a mix of both. I think from the retail side of things, if you look at like Robinhood, they actually do a lot of options. I think a lot of people trade options in the traditional markets, even if you're not a big quant fund. I think it's more availability of liquidity on chain, as well as having the right now, for a lot of teams, it's going to be a black box that you actually are working with a market maker. You don't really understand how you're formulating those options and what's the market behind it. Whereas with on-chain options, you kind of know the liquidity profile. It actually does create a lot of transparency for those teams. So for institutions, they don't have to facilitate these options orders through a black box. As well as for the one interesting thing about Panoptic is that when you launch a market with Panoptic, you also get the spot market liquidity for. So not only are you having to go find like $100 for the spot market, $100 for the options market, you can basically use the same liquidity for both markets, which basically would mean that most tokens should be able to have on-chain option markets. And at that point, you can start embedding downside protection into investment products, and it really just opens the gate where a lot of us don't know how to trade options, but we would buy a product that maybe embeds some downside protection. And that has kind of become like templatized product that you can apply to different asset types. So I think that will help out, I think, for the users, as well as giving a lot of institutions access as like different asset issuers come online with these different product types that we'll enable.
Yeah, I want to add as well that when you have an institution, whether it's TradFi or even DeFi, they have some risk framework in place. They cannot go 1000x leverage on a perp exchange. They have to now protect their downside, and it's not something that it's different than when you have a retail user base. So it's almost a demand that is emerging with the conversion of a lot of funds that go onto the blockchain, and it's now serving that quite concrete use case. It's speculation and kind of trading is very well served on the perp side, but the risk management side, which is maybe less attractive for a retail user but very important for core kind of risk management strategy for institutions, is where we think that options can all the other instruments that can serve this. So again, we don't want to have the funds having to hire a full-time quant to do this, but if they have a risk profile they want to mitigate, if they have some parameters that they know, okay, if the price of my treasury goes down by X percent value at risk, then you can easily kind of include an option trade on top. So I would say that initially both retail and institutions were maybe more parallel in terms of adoption. Retail was the focus for the past few years. Institutions now is beginning at the forefront. It's going to mix in the middle, but then it's where it's available when servers in real need that we'll see the most adoption.
Yeah, I think with the securitized assets coming on chain is going to also unlock the requirement for options. I mean, a lot of products today that people invest in are structured products, and it's kind of like a very important part of a lot of portfolios in terms of risk management. And so I think that also is going to push a lot of the drive and need for on chain options.
Yeah, I think you guys are kind of already answering the next question I had. But in the past in DeFi, I feel like a lot of yield has been kind of people didn't really know what the strategies were underneath. The APIs were really high and then kind of, fizzled out or were almost not profitable. And so there's a lot of yield farming and stuff. But now I think we're kind of shifting this from earning yield into managing risk or profiting from volatility. And hopefully there will still be kind of this demand for volatility, different volatility trades, where in this state of the market, it's very uneven at the moment. And so there's a lot of arbitrage opportunities. Do you think kind of that's both have equal amount of priority, or is it more of managing risk, as you guys mentioned before?
I mean, I'll have Derek answer about what their Steer Protocol's client require. But again, if you're a retail user and then you have in front of you like sources of yield with all the incidents, layer 0 resolve, you don't even know where the risks are. And it's typically, do you get 10% APY or does it go to 0? And like these aren't necessarily priced in for a lot of these protocols. And people are waking up and they're realizing, hey, okay, maybe this looping strategy is not so safe anymore because a tiny move, protocol 4 layers down the line fails, the repercussions can hit my like crafted loop. So at the end of the day, we do feel that options just open up a new window into what you can do on chain. And we don't want to have people be full-time traders of short volatility, but then any volatility, again, could be a hack, could be any type of move. You can have an option trade that kind of satisfies this. So at least in terms of how you can monetize this or how you can leverage into this is very, very possible with structured product. It's something that is very, very popular in the real world, if you want to think about it. But it's also like not losing money is probably mostly important for a lot of these institutions as well. So again, yield is one side, but then not losing is more important, I'd say. Never going to 0 is the goal for all of DeFi.
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of different types of clients. So like, let's go down the list. If it's a TGE, that's kind of like a big treasury moment for most teams, and they don't know where the token might go. It really depends on the tokenomics and just everything else that comes with it. But being able to not diminish the treasury over the first 6 months of a token is actually a very important thing for the long-term longevity of that project, right? And so if they don't provide some kind of risk behavior as they go into their token launch, that could actually be very detrimental to their to the success. The other one is that when you look at a lot of the LP deals that happen in the market today, it's usually for stuff that's delta neutral, so it's very lending focused. When the moment you start accessing like AMM markets, options markets, that is something where it's not a direct, I'm always going to get more money from what I deposit. Now, of course, the Aave thing happened, but usually you're going to receive more than you put in when you're doing lending. For everything else, it really requires a much more sophisticated mindset around how you're managing those assets. I don't want to say that lending is the easy road, but once you get past lending, it really does become a jungle. And so with that, a lot of times when we try and talk to LPs, they're looking for delta neutral yield. So if we can hedge out the risk, if I'm doing, let's say, an LP for USDC, BTC, I could hedge out the BTC downside risk and maybe also cap the upside a little bit. It does create a portfolio where I could now LP in confidence into a market the same way I might start thinking about the risk profile of a lending vault. And that really opens up the gate. So if there's an APR that's really good, or maybe if you're on Aerodrome and there's incentives, that could be the hurdle which starts to really unlock more liquidity for these long tail assets as well as for these blue chips. And then the third one is that there's treasuries out there as well who carry either sometimes a mix of different assets, or they're carrying a bunch of blue chips. usually teams don't really manage that treasury. And options really allow at least structured products that they can enter into or basically even deploy on behalf of their assets, allow them to create constructs that could then, also create a better treasury position for them.
Definitely. I think you already answered the next question that I had. I'd love to kind of go through like all of the steps from like, let's say I'm an ETH treasury, I have a position, or maybe we could do the TGE where, this token isn't even launched yet, trying to kind of prepare for a successful launch, implement good tokenomics. What does this look like when those players are using your system? What is Panoptic responsible? What role does Steer play? And what is now possible with our partnership that wouldn't have been before?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is that for us, we have a single platform where you can manage and see all of your different markets. So that could be your spot markets across all 60 different AMMs that we have. It could be your lending markets on Aave, Euler, Morpho, and Compound. Or it could now be options markets. Now, let's say you don't have an options market today. If you log into our platform, you register your token with us, we'll actually, if you already have an existing spot market, allow you to just turn on the options market through the same UI. So that's just a really nice unified place. Whereas if you're an asset issuer, again, post tokenization, doing a TGE or whatever, my stable coin, you need to be able to kind of see the health of the lending market, see the health of the options, maybe potentially start structured products. So for everyone that we work with, we try and provide a framework where they can either do it themselves or talk to us if they need any help. But it's really a tool for them to kind of manage all of their different markets. After that, we do have delta neutral strategies that we'll be launching. There's some carry trays that we'll be starting up, and other different structured products, as well as the ability for people to build their own custom structures. So if you want to come in and potentially build out a custom structure, if you like, again, was just talking about, if you already know the risk or you have a risk, configuration that you are already thinking of, you should be able to do that on your own and kind of get things going without having to build out a ton of infrastructure. Today, you'd have to build out, automation frameworks, key management, and that just becomes, a hurdle for most. So this would be basically point and click, which is really exciting.
Great. Yeah, Guillaume, do you have anything to add about Panoptic?
No, I mean, this is good. Yeah, the managed part versus do it your own is also a big dichotomy. And then some funds in TradFi, they have a huge need that the bank can craft a single structured product only to them. And then they can now create a more healthy market where two sides can come to play. And it's just the linking between what a entity needs and what can the platform provide. And that will open up a lot of opportunities as well. So the fund that wants to protect their holdings can now create a market for options traders that can now leverage and kind of create these directional bets. So it's all kind of a flywheel effect. But at the end of the day, we just have to start with kind of what do actor A wants and how does that help actor B at the end of the day.
Definitely. So it's more curated, more kind of shaped to each individual, kind of different. Are there any processes that you think are going to be a little bit more difficult to onboard, or things that users will need to understand before kind of creating these new structured product strategies? Or are we going to kind of guide them through that whole process and curate them for them?
Yeah, I would say both. So the nice thing about our platform, and this has stood for the entire time that we've been around for about 5 years now, is that all of the strategies that we develop also have vaults that are public vaults that anyone can kind of deposit into. And all the configurations, what the strategy is all basically kind of in the open. Not the actual underlying code, but the configuration, the risk profile, the performance over time, the current rate of return, all of that is basically transparent. So luckily for users, they won't hopefully have to configure them themselves. They'll actually just pick up one that looks like it'd be the right risk profile and kind of fits the bill for them. But for those who do want custom structures, it really kind of depends on what you're looking for. It could be that you're just looking to go delta neutral, and there may be a strategy out there that you can just kind of pick up and it's just a couple clicks. Or it could be a little bit more complex structure where you're trying to coincide with another strategy that might be running on let's say like Midas or something like that. That's where you would probably need to dive in. And luckily, Steer has a complete development toolkit where you can kind of come in and start using the Panoptic SDKs, as well as embedding yourselves within our external compute network that we run.
Great. Yeah, I think recently there's been a lot of RWA talk as well, tokenizing different assets, bringing all sorts of new assets on chain, having the opportunity for those non-existing markets yet to officially launch with options as a part of that ecosystem. What role do you think being able to trade volatility will have on the underlying market maturation process, and kind of like what are some misconceptions you guys have heard people say that you would want to dispel, and kind of to involve to even out the trickle down effects that volatility trading have had on spot markets in the past?
I mean, I would say that any asset issuer is doing a lot of hard work. Can you custody the assets? Can you find like clients that want to tokenize stocks, RWAs, real kind of tangible assets? And once they're tokenized, ERC20s, like the next step is what we feel is missing. And as you pointed out, like the volatility aspect, the way that you can trade it is kind of one core component, and it all goes through where can you trade it? Is it on a like call swap type of RFQ system, or is it on an AMM? And what we believe that the Panoptic, again, Steer partnership can bring is that if you want to build a successful RWA, you need on-chain liquidity. You need a lending market that you can kind of create credit markets on top of that. You may not need options, but with Panoptic, it kind of falls off naturally. So the offering is that you can now create a much more complete, tradable, mature asset because you can do something with it. You can lend it, you can trade an option, you can write covered calls by using Panoptic as kind of the infrastructure. And if you start with, oh, I'm going to put some of it in Uniswap, and then maybe I'm going to go and lend it on Aave, it's going to take a lot of time for all of these components to align themselves. But when we start with Panoptic, it's already present on day one. AMM liquidity, lending, options, perp-like instruments. And that is kind of the key for any, again, successful RWA to do something that's just not just looping maybe on Morpho and Pendle, but now create a more rich market. And to some extent, the management or the vault infrastructure can now be kind of automatized or be made much more efficient from kind of the Steer point of view. That makes the whole thing kind of very, very well integrated.
Yeah, I think one of the products that we have actually basically blends up lending as well as options, right? So let's say when you deposit into Aave or another platform like Morpho or something like that, if there is, for instance, a hack or something, you would still kind of hold the option to potentially kind of redeem some of the underlying assets. And so you could have potentially had some kind of downside protection baked into the product, despite the externalities that are kind of happening to the like actually primary portfolio. And so those are kind of things that if we embed more of these downside protections and more of these risk profile, risk controls, or embedding those parts inside of the product, I feel like a lot of people would lose less money, or at least we'd be able to have confidence around, is there a floor to this asset in terms of what its value of price.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think right now, from kind of where we've seen what institutions are currently doing, it's a lot of just holding the treasuries and tokens going down, and then a lot of different perp tools are being used, but those can very quickly kind of turn on you. Even if you're potentially betting the right direction, perps can still end up losing you money. And so I'm curious to see what you guys think. Who are the early users of options today, and what needs to happen for the broader adoption kind of to shift? Are these treasuries just okay with losing money? Is that kind of what they're used to, and so they're not really like looking for anything else? Or I don't know, why has it taken them so long?
Yeah, I'll answer a little bit here. From what we're seeing, for many assets, market makers actually won't price an option. if it's not below a certain threshold, right? So being able to have option markets on any long tail asset is actually a huge unlock for many. So for treasuries, they'll finally be able to potentially get the option that they're looking for. The second one is when you're doing a black box option with the market maker, you're probably paying a little bit higher terms. And some teams also may not actually be going for that, like for options with their market maker today. So I think a lot of times it's more of, can we provide them a better rate? And also, could they get a better rate on chain? And then on top of that, could they potentially even just get better access to those tools because it's not available with the current market makers that they're working with? Not all, I mean, you have to be a pretty big market maker right now to be underwriting options at this moment. You really don't see it out of most market makers. It's really a select few.
And the select few are not doing it for free. They have like margins they have to hit, and to some extent it's less transparent. And the teams may not have all the detail as to how that option is priced. But yeah, I'd say that the opening up these new markets will be something that is beneficial for teams that want to launch tokens, liquid funds as well, like the pre TGE perps serve a good purpose in a way. You can kind of hedge out future price moves, but it's kind of limited in a way as to what you can do with it. With options, you have a little bit more kind of freedom, a little bit more grayness. You don't necessarily want to have losses if you're wrong directionally. So again, options offer kind of an extra layer. And again, you see this in TradFi. You see this as a necessary tool for any type of fund. And now it's kind of made a lot like easier to make, and it's all made possible again on Panoptic as well. So that's kind of the use cases are there, but in the infra now is catching up slowly.
Yeah, and you did touch on perps. I mean, if you do funding arbitrage on a perp today, you can still get liquidated, and some actually do. And that's supposed to be like a delta neutral strategy. And the reason for that is because when you do options, it's actually not a structured payoff. You don't actually have that baked into the instrument that you're holding. Whereas with options, you can buy them, and you can know that when it resolves, that is actually the true value that you were expecting. That is, I think, the biggest piece here. Because a lot of people will say, hey, a lot of people right now are doing, for instance, delta neutral LPing through like lending or through, which is looping, which you don't want to loop. That's a bad one, right? And then again, they'll also go to perps, and then perps is usually like this disjointed asset that they're holding. So it's actually not like this atomic platform. So it's those are other two things where it's like, perps are being used right now, but I don't know if it's the proper instrument, for the long term. I think it's more of a stopgap or a Band-Aid right now.
Might make some enemies here, but yeah, I do feel like the perps, the final state of any DeFi product, it might be like a DeFi, like a prime brokerage type of offering, but what you described, where you may have to have some collateral on a perps exchange, and some of it on a lending protocol, and some of it on Uniswap, and some of it on all of the different platforms that you could get liquidated. And any of them, because you don't net the capital against one another. So that unification of, again, options is the tip of the spear in terms of complexity, but all of the hedging, the lending that you can create on below it is built into the same protocol. So that's kind of the one pool of capital that can work for you in many ways is kind of a big unlock in a way.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Yeah, I think it's clear that people are kind of really ready for different structured yield products on chain. They're looking for something more stable and curated. And how people on Twitter are talking about yield has changed in the last couple months as well, with a lot of hacks and liquidations happening. And so I think there's a kind of a shift from protocols becoming the front end. Well, not that we've ever had great UI in for DeFi users anyways, but I think now it's kind of more about the back end and the markets that we're building with vaults, with structured products, everything kind of in one place. What do you guys think is kind of the biggest goal that you guys have for the first couple months for the Steer Panoptic partnership, and who do you think should be paying attention to this right now?
I'll let you go first, and then I'll carry on next.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I touched on this a bit earlier as well, but the infrastructure is a huge amount of work. Whether you are RWA that tokenizes an asset, or even a perps exchange that kind of makes the whole thing run. Building infra is a full-time job. Distribution, how do you get people to use it? How do you kind of package these different instruments in a way that is easy to for funds and users to use, is another aspect that's quite difficult. And in our case with Panoptic, we've been doing a lot of extremely hard work on the infra side, and we have the whole thing in place. And then in a way, the way that we see this partnership with Steer is that we can now have kind of, again, distribution channels. We can have a much better interrelationship with token issuers, treasuries, anyone that is facing the different problem. They have a lot of risk on their balance sheet and have no way to kind of let the steam out, is kind of how we can kind of connect into one another. So the best scenario is that at the end of the day, we do feel like the playbook for any asset issuer, playbook for any treasury, any TGE, post-TGE team is to have at the core level a relationship with Steer to manage their funds, but also at the infra level have a Panoptic layer that can kind of offer everything that they need in terms of risk management.
Yeah, I mean, we've helped hundreds of teams do TGEs over the years, and the one thing that I think that they're missing, I mean, they usually don't launch with lending markets. You know, first it's going to be a DEX launch on Aerodrome or something like that, but you don't find them coming live with derivative markets or with lending markets. This is something that you kind of have to grow into. I call it kind of the token product lifecycle, or kind of having to graduate into it. The craziest part about Panoptic and the way that it's built on top of UniV3 is, one, UniV3 is on every chain. If a chain launches, if it's an L2 or an L1 or whatever it might be, Uniswap is there in a V2, a V3, and hopefully a V4 sense. And then on top of that, if you're going to launch, it's mostly on a UniV3 style DEX. And with Panoptic, you could have options go day one. Right. So from a TGE perspective, you could then, or even from an asset issuer perspective, if you're going to tokenize through Securitize or something like that, you can go to investors and say, hey, look, we just tokenized this asset. And yes, you may think it's risky, but here's a product that wraps that asset, provides some downside protection, and I can offer you that on day zero as I create these markets. That is huge because it starts unlocking people to say, okay, you know, maybe I will invest in those products. I think this is going to be really important for people coming out of Securitize, people coming out of Ondo. I think a lot of the teams that are doing stablecoins or yield-bearing stablecoins on real estate and all those other fun kind of topics, they'll also be basically looking to embed these products as they start going live and trying to expand the scale of their TVL. And as they do that, they need to be able to talk to those LPs and to those investors and say, hey guys, you know, this isn't going to go to zero, or, you know, there's not going to be a situation where the token, you know, goes to zero because of a hack. By embedding these options early on, you know, that would basically solve a lot of their future problems if those things do happen.
Great. Yeah, I think we're at time now. So thank you to everybody who was listening. Thank you, Guillaume and Derek, for joining. We're going to have some more live streams from Steer and Panoptic in the future as well. Some interesting case studies, and V2 for Panoptic is almost ready. So everybody, please stay tuned for that. And thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.